Hello and welcome to a slightly later than scheduled Raw preview podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from What Culture, joined by the Dudley boys of What Culture, Michael Anfer and Michael Sidgwick, to preview tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling, either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, or the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT pay-per-views. We have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on Wrestle Culture. As I said, though, joined by Michael Havertz and Michael Sidgwick to preview tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. Sorry if I sounded a bit off there. I realised I had the YouTube video open and was just listening to myself. So we are slightly later than scheduled. Technical issues. Apologies for all but that. But yes, tonight on Monday Night Raw is the go-home episode ahead of Money in the Bank. And there could well be a former WWE champion returning, Michael Sidgwick, in the form of AJ Styles.
That's a bit late to be doing a preview, isn't it? Have you ever seen Stand By Me, boys? When he goes there, by the time we get there, the kid won't even be dead anymore. Well, he could substitute kid for show and keep the word dead because the show will be dead still, just like that kid in Stand By Me. AJ Styles, according to John Pollock, who's very reputable, is reportedly scheduled to be back in action tonight. I tell you what, this is the source. In fact, the entire source of my fascination ahead of tonight's Monday Night Raw. Will they acknowledge that he's dead?
He's dead. Or, his friends mysteriously aren't there anymore. Anything like that. It's been a busy month for a man that's been laying under the dirt since WrestleMania. It's AJ Styles coming back. Theoretically, this would be like a babyface thing, wouldn't it? There would be a crowd there. There'd be a big pop because he hasn't been seen in a month. He's a welcome addition to this Money in the Bank ladder match, theoretically, because of what AJ Styles in a ladder match promises. But it's really difficult to work out what kind of reaction any of this will get. They went really heavy last week with the Apollo Crews sympathy. Really, really heavy. So anyone that slides into that spot that Apollo Crews has lost should be a heel, should be a dick. It's impossible to gauge how any of this will go.
Yeah, hi to Ryan Bailey. Don't forget to leave your comments and questions and stuff for the boys in the comment section below. Ryan Bailey, already excited for AJ Styles to represent the grave community. Now, we talk about a return for AJ Styles tonight, and we just assume that, he's going to be chucked into this. I do believe it's a last chance gauntlet, which is also slightly impossible considering Murphy is already in a match with Drew McIntyre, which we'll get into in due course. And MVP's kind of busy with his new boys, Shane Thorne and Brendan Vink, taking on the Two Fly crew.
Jesus Christ.
So, it's complete. It's a complete shambles, this advert.
The last chance thing is a good idea on paper, isn't it? Because you take all the losers and you say, do you want to be less of a loser compared to all your loser friends? I don't mind that as a very, very stupid excuse for a pro wrestling match. But if half the losers aren't in it, then what does that even say for the merit of climbing the corporate ladder? Maybe some of them have been hearing all these promos that have been alluding to, but not saying it specifically, that somebody might get thrown off a building. There was certainly that nudge to it on SmackDown when Baron Corbin threw Daniel Bryan off that tiny stage. I think Michael Cole said something like, and just imagine what could happen when they're on the top of the roof at Titan Tower.
Maybe I hit the crack.
What don't I know that they've filmed that they're starting to pepper into the commentary now?
Becky Lynch let loose on some media outlet or other that Vince McMahon demonstrated how to take a bump off a building.
What? Yeah. How did he demonstrate that?
Well, I don't know because I wasn't there, but it is a visual medium, this podcast. So know how big Vince McMahon tends to go, but also how frail he's looking these days. If he's had to demonstrate that bump off a building, he's probably going to try and do the whole flailing arms, but a little bit old. It's not the man he was. So this is how I imagine it went.
Just him doing flat back arms, but asking the guys in post to add that noise they did when Baron Corbin pushed Elias off the podium.
The old Chris Finch.
He's thrown a billionaire over a pub. What have you ever done?
Yeah, it's not quite Alan Rickman in Die Hard, all this, is it? there's some speculation about other names that could replace Apollo Crews joining. I've been practicing this. Let's see if I can remember the other 5 people who are guaranteed to be in the men's winning the bank ladder match. Otis, great news that coming from Friday Night SmackDown. Daniel Bryan, King Corbin, Rey Mysterio, who's the one I always forget, and Aleister Black. The speculation about Jinder being in it, or we like you say, if it's going to be a second chance or a last chance gauntlet, whatever you want to call it, you've got the likes of Cesaro as MVP, as we've mentioned, Drew Gulak. But yeah, it strikes me that a bit more star power or at least speculation and intrigue would be introduced with AJ Styles, Sige.
Yeah, AJ Styles. It's one of those where it's not a traditional ladder match, and you don't know how heavy they're going to go on the construction of a ladder match, which you'd expect AJ Styles would be tremendous at. One thing I want to say is I don't want it to be Jinder. I don't want it to be Jinder, not because it's going to be a poor match between him and Drew McIntyre. Not for any of those reasons. I don't begrudge Jinder Mahal of having another crack at the main event at this point. I'm numb and I'm past caring. You know why I don't want it to be Jinder Mahal? Because I don't want to have to suffer through the discourse of loads of people going, loads of story here, loads and loads of story here. No, there isn't. They went in a bad faction together. And that's it. They might say it in a promo, me and you, we're not so dissimilar, you and I. And then they can say something to the effect of, we were both in a crap faction. We both got released because we were unmotivated and or crap. We both came back and got totally shredded and got the opportunity. That's the extent of the story. That's it. It's not like a fantastically crafted narrative of like huge emotional stakes. They were just in a crap faction together and got shredded. And that's it.
This feels like the opposite of those ones when we talk about those matches that we desperately wish weren't going to happen until the crowds are back. I'm actually all right with them to race through the Jinder program. I know it'll desperately upset a lot of people on Twitter that have been talking about dream match, but I want this in the empty arena era. I don't think it's going to be Jinder and Money in the Bank because honestly, I think they've got Jinder on the board as one of Drew's like easy opponents, whether that be on a Raw, like a one-night angle where Jinder comes out at the start and decks him and he puts the title on the line at the end of the night, or they somehow drag it to a pay-per-view, kicking and screaming, whatever follows sort of Money in the Bank a month later, I don't know. But I have no thirst for this match, to wit, I don't mind seeing it happen now. There's still a sense, because of daft stuff like climbing the corporate ladder or the Boneyard match, there's still this idea that like a lot of this feels like it doesn't count. Like Zelina Vega's stable haven't won a match yet, but like have they even been in any real matches? Because is this Performance Center Raw not just a figment of all our imaginations that will be thought of as such the second we go back to crowds? It reminds me when WWE first went to HD in 2008, and then it was if like they couldn't use things from pre-2007 in video packages. It's like, oh, that footage is too ugly. I don't want to see anything of that. Like, I can't imagine there being too many video package moments from this particular era. So I hoy the Jinder and Drew match in there, and then we can just forget it ever happened like half of the other stuff we're watching.
I do believe.
Think, sorry, Wilborn. Do we think on that basis that AJ Styles, if a lot of this doesn't count, do you think they'll at least go to the lengths to have some dirt on his arm? Like, please, for my intelligence.
Like when the Giant fell off Cobo Hall, they wanted him to come out with a fish sticking out of his singlet to show that he fell in the water.
Not with like some worms on him or something.
I do believe that the next pay-per-view is Extreme Rules, just to let you know after this one, if I'm not mistaken. But who knows? They could hoy anything in there. Oh, my
God. Imagine. Extreme Rules. Just like everything's like a horrifically violent match in an empty arena, and you can just hear harrowing weapon shots for 3 hours straight. Sounds great. Seriously, I'm not being ironic there. I'm being earnest.
Isn't Extreme Rules at the top of the document that WWE got signed off on to allow them to run these shows in the first place to class the rest as essential?
And just to clarify for those in the comments, asking whether or not it could be Kevin Owens to return tonight. I do believe Kevin Owens not only is not only seemed to take time off following WrestleMania because he probably a bit like Sami Zayn doesn't want to go into such a scenario, and WWE said you don't have to, but also he did suffer an injury as we reported over the weekend, so it probably won't be Kevin Owens. AJ Styles, as you mentioned there, is the name that many people are speculating could return tonight and may well be shoved into Money in the Bank. But this, of course, is the Money in the Bank go home episode of Monday Night Raw, and as a teaser for what we can expect on Sunday for the WWE champion, it's going to be Seth Rollins watching on, no doubt, whilst Murphy challenges Drew McIntyre in a non-title match. A final showdown for McIntyre and Rollins tonight, do you reckon, Sidge?
Without doubt. They've cut the promo that sold me on the match last week on a dreadful Raw. That was actually a really earnestly good moment. So they've done the talking, they've done the contract signing trope. All that's left to do now is for Seth and Buddy Murphy, being the heels, to convey the idea that there might be a cloud hanging over Drew McIntyre's title reign, that they will beat him up together and they will stand tall over Drew McIntyre. That's the way these things go. I mean, I'm not being funny. This company right now at the moment has proven itself to be creatively bankrupt, which we knew already, and quite frankly, we've known for years. But just the extent to which they are crawling through these tropes without any sort of care as to how weird, and that's the word, weird, they appear in this new context. I can't see them going beyond the realms of cliche with this one. Hamflet, you're the one who's kinder to WWE than I. Will they do anything vaguely more interesting?
Oh Christ, no! Drew goes ends Raw on his back, having been beaten up by the two of them. I'm sort of, I don't even like the word optimistic. It's a bit like when we do the Wednesday Night War preview and there's things on those shows we look forward to. I'm not even optimistic about the Drew Buddy Murphy match, but I am into it at least. They both hit really hard. They both look amazing. They both do moves that are amazing, and they feel like physical specimens when they deliver stuff. Drew, it's a weird thing, right? Because these shows aren't good. This reign isn't favourable. These aren't the circumstances you would have wanted. But this sort of feels like a post-WrestleMania success story for the company. I've enjoyed him pretty much every week, often in spite of some of his silliness, but the matches in particular, I'm being entertained in spite of myself. So whatever high hopes are in this era, I've got them for Drew versus Murphy.
Speaking of which, some lovely comments and donations. Thank you for them in the comments section. Eric Vasquez asking if there's going to be a live stream on Sunday. By all accounts, yes, we will be doing a live stream to watch Money in the Bank. Still confirming bits of details, but we will tell you more about that when we find out. But Matt Rains, thank you for a donation. Matt says, afternoon, Adam, Sidge and Gramps. A proper program between Crocodile Murphy and Drew would be mint, would it not?
God.
Yeah, we've been singing the praises of Murphy in the past. I'm really excited about tonight's match.
Can the YouTube app make people take the donations back, Will?
But as a setup for Money in the Bank is obviously going to be great. But I'd happily watch more Murphy and Drew McIntyre matches. They work really well together, don't they, Hamflet?
Yeah, Murphy's a really odd case, isn't he? Because he really, really shines in these matches, as daft as they are, and as how they're quite they can be quite sloppy tributes to Kenny Omega and a few Kota Ibushi and a few others that he steals from. Because so much of it is new to the WWE setting and the style of a WWE match, he has it in him to sort of shock you. So if you're watching at home, something will happen that'll genuinely give you that kind of gasp pop, which is especially an achievement in the empty arena. And Drew seemed to be leveling up to that, doing daft stuff like the dives the other week and just the little flares that he was adding. Like I say, it's odd to feel optimistic, but I just sense that they'll probably give this time. They'll probably give this 10, 15 minutes, and it'll be that main event beef slapper, to quote Andy Murray. It'll probably be quite good.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to this one tonight. I would be interested in seeing a recurring series between these two, because I've been interested in seeing how good Buddy Murphy actually is for a while. The omens are very, very promising. He's a guy who's worked, honest to goodness, veritable bangers on this main roster, where for whatever reason he seems to transcend this style that has put upon so many guys. But I'd like to see him in a long series with anyone really, not least of which a performer of Drew's caliber, to see how much he's actually got, how much of it is just hollow plagiarism from, as Hamflet points out, Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi, or if it in fact is just nice tribute, an enterprising way of getting stuff over that hasn't been seen in a WWE ring. Maybe he's just clever enough to plagiarize correctly and not just a guy who doesn't know that he's just stealing off people. So I'd like to see if there's any real depth behind the performer Buddy Murphy, who I think there is, but I'd really like to see him prove it in a series of matches where he'd have no choice but to drill really deep into a story if he's having to do it week after week after week. A best-of-7 series to see if Buddy Murphy is as good as everyone thinks. I'll be well up for that, Mr. Matt Rains.
Yeah, and I think they could work really, really well together. Australian wrestler Buddy Murphy, Scottish wrestler Drew McIntyre. Titles there, Crocodile Dundee. Right.
I'm from Winnipeg, you idiot.
What was I going to ask? Oh, yeah. Hamlet. Bring the mood down completely as after that.
Thanks.
The ratings are getting worse and worse and worse. SmackDown had a horrible rating over the weekend.
Good.
Raw, I'm kind of disappointed because Raw's segment, the contract signing, which of course we all knew where it was going to, but it was still with two people that I think we really enjoyed. Did a horrible rating for a segment.
I mean,
one of the worst in Raw.
Absolute lunatic to have endured what came before it for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
A lunatic.
So, are you any concern, Hamlet, that things are just going to progressively get worse, or will we finally plateau eventually at, I don't know, 1.5 or something?
Well, I might be a paid shill, but I'm not a shareholder, so I don't give a toss. I like seeing those numbers drop. I like seeing wrestling companies punished for their irresponsible decision-making at this time, which I think is what this is. I think it's viewers making a choice, and that choice is not pro wrestling, and there are obviously lots of other things to watch and lots of other reasons to avoid it. But this is, I will say, caveat all of this, there's never been a time to blame the performers less. You can look at the things that wrestling shows, and it feels like NXT and AEW Dynamite are sold more on the promise of things rather than Raw and SmackDown. But I wouldn't pin any blame on any wrestlers at the moment for their segment not doing a good quarter hour or people not sticking around for the third hour of Raw, whatever. The type of stuff we would normally judge some of this stuff by goes out the window for me. It's an overall interest in wrestling. It's how much empty arena wrestling can you stomach in one sitting. Maybe Raw, maybe it's being watched by people in bursts on YouTube because that's all they can tolerate, because it's weird, because it's like unsettling at points, because the stories are less interesting, because everything feels a lot more dragged out when you catch that silence for a second. It's WWE's problem, but it's wrestling's problem, but it's a problem that's wrestling's made by continuing to go on. If this had disappeared, the thirst would be greater for it to come back, and the numbers, I imagine, will be quite solid, as I imagine they'll take a bit of a bump when crowds come back. But I don't see anything but a continued decline. It's surely impossible for a storyline to be that great in this era to win viewers back.
Sidge, Cody Green says, do you think going back to 2 hours would help Raw in its general dread? That's not going to happen, is it?
Well, I don't know, because the whole reason why they stretched it out to the complete detriment of the program to 3 hours is just to capitalize on the fact that it was always, like, quite often, as much as we sort of cry about the ratings, not cry, I couldn't give a toss, to be honest, report on bad ratings. It's often number one on cable. It's invariably number one on USA, and they're extremely thrilled with it. So thrilled that they ruined it to go to 3 hours. But with all that changing now, I think if not now, then never. You got 3 hour Raws for the rest of your goddamn life. If theoretically they continue to plummet to the detriment of other programming that USA could put on, but I don't necessarily think that's the case. But for the sake of Raw itself, if they take a long-term view that it might be for the best to go 2 hours on this to try and capture the overall viewership, because we haven't got a hope in hell of capturing that demo, there's marketing opportunities they could take to reduce it down to 2 hours. There's by that I mean there's all sorts of bollocks they could spin. They could say it to the effect of, like, and the best of the best, 2 hours, just get rid of the crap at 3 hours. They could do any kind of cliched bollocks to make those 2 hours look like something great for the fans, a great decision for the benefit of the fans, rather than an enforced measure, because we are totally screwing the pooch of these 3 hours.
Right, let's talk about some of the tag matches we got coming up tonight. A slightly confusing one to begin with here, Michael.
Always.
Yeah. You've got the Street Profits, the Raw Tag Team Champions, versus the Viking Raiders. Now, as far as I'm aware, last week when this was announced on Raw, it was, we want the smoke, we want a shot of the titles, etc., etc. In the subsequent week or so, this has seemingly become a non-title match at time of recording anyway, and looking at WWE.com, it appears to be a non-title match. Sidge and I were talking before we started this. This is going to be a win for the Viking Raiders and a settle for the title shot of the pay-per-view, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah, it's obviously with this being taped and with lots of, I'm assuming a lot of like Money in the Bank taped, if not all of it in the can, then they must have just looked at that card and thought, right, what can we add and how can we get there with rematches? It's happened on Raw and SmackDown last week where things were added to the card off the back of stuff we'd effectively already seen. So I'd expect more of this too, because in their minds, needs must. In their mind, we need we, the fan base, need a tag team title match at this pay-per-view when there's probably plenty to be going on with. And the Street Profits have felt like them probably the most overexposed by this empty arena setting. Just got no interest in seeing them. The pair of them, like the two pairs, as Cedric pointed out a couple of weeks back, to have Bianca Belair slapping some seriousness into the Street Profits, only for the Viking Raiders to respond by doing carpool karaoke, was so brainless in trying to even arrive at this match and get to it. It's the sort of opposite of that result curiosity as well, because really neither team can afford to lose this. And yet I find myself not wanting either of them to win. So that feels like the worst of both worlds.
Raiders go over because champions don't mean anything and they never get over as champions in this company. And, it's just a total fact of the matter. The way they book is horrendous. They simply cannot book. And I'm the negative Nancy for pointing that out. Ooh. Well, you're going to see another pair of champions that will not be over because that's just the way they book. How else will they arrive at a championship match? They're not going to say, the Street Profits have, they've won tonight. They've won tonight's match. The Viking Raiders no longer have a claim to the titles. End of story. There's nothing really for either team to do on Sunday. Let's move on. We'll have some matches between the rest of the tag teams next week. That's not how it's going to go. That's absolutely not how it's going to go. Either the Viking Raiders go over, thus diminishing the aura of the new tag team champions, or there'll be some kind of screwy finish, which will be dramatically ineffective to build towards the match on Sunday. I don't know what else I'm meant to say. I don't know how. There's no other good faith, optimistic, be positive way of analysing such a match like this tonight, with the fact that Sunday is on the horizon.
Intriguing to see what happens tonight with the Two Fly crew and Shane Thorne and Brendan Vink. MVP, of course, looking after them now. How do you see this one playing out, Sidge?
I don't know. I've got absolutely no idea, which is kind of a good thing because you've got a team that needs to be built and established. When you say need, there's no need about it. I think Ricochet and Cedric Alexander are, under normal circumstances, the kind of team that I wouldn't give a toss if they went 50-50 over and over again because I just simply enjoy seeing them perform. They're the type of act that will absolutely get the blood racing, and you see so little of that on WWE television from an in-ring perspective. So I'd love to see them just perform, but I don't really care about the outcome. I'm not invested in Ricochet or Cedric Alexander as characters. I don't know why they've come together. There's been no explanation. They were both completely on the down trend before coming together. There's no real story in a WWE sense point of view. I've seen great stories told with Ricochet over the years, not in WWE, not with the way that they do television. So ultimately, just as long as they don't talk very much, as hard as that is to say, they could talk off the cuff by themselves, and I would listen to them, and I would think that's not the best promo in the world. That's not really going to sell me on a match. But ultimately, I wouldn't be cringing and wanting to die on the inside because they can't handle WWE's verbiage, which essentially is just loads of hot bits of crap going over your fingers and think, oh, that hurts.
Ricochet remains the man capable of doing things that the majority of the world can't, that I feel great sympathy for above all else. All four wrestlers and MVP in this case. Like I'm trying to watch them independent of like the rest of the product, because what I'm seeing is 5 people trying. Like the work is reasonably good. Like we've got no reason to be critical of like Brendan Vink and Shane Thorne because they're getting an opportunity here. They could be great. What an addition they could be. Same as the Two Fly crew. I like tag teams that start impromptu and come together and like end up meaning something. Often they end up meaning a great deal. So yeah, like good for everybody for getting something, and I genuinely hope it all works out. But yeah, with no story and with no like proper build up, other than saying like a match graphic or saying this might happen, like I think it's too big an ask to have any sort of emotional investment. I just hope things all go well for all of them. Like all the best of the lads just trying to do their job.
Yeah, exactly. It's a step in the right direction for people like Ricochet and Cedric Alexander, who hopefully more and more the higher ups will realise how talented they are. There was a clip on Squared Circle this morning of Ricochet running along the members of the OC before hitting AJ Styles with a move. I can't remember what I think it might have been SummerSlam even, and it just made me think, oh, how the mighty have fallen. Interesting question here from Mark Kingston. You want to take this one, Hamflet? Rumours of the Apollo and Money in the Bank is he was injured last week and he may well, be taken out of the match. Do you think MVP could be his heel manager going forward, or his mouthpiece perhaps?
you could do with a mouthpiece, and MVP's right there, so it certainly feels convenient. I don't know. It's tricky because they went so big on the sympathy last week, like so big that in normal circumstances you'd be like, oh, what a babyface, fight up from underneath. But WWE's kind of an ugly company, so the heel turn is likely where it ends up. The guy that yet again, the 10,000th wrestler in a row that blames the company he is in because WWE secretly hates itself, talks about how he didn't get opportunities and all that sort of thing. And he finally gets one and he gets screwed, just like Ali and just like Kofi Kingston and just like Becky Lynch and just like Bray Wyatt chainsawing himself. This is so patterned in now that I could absolutely see them turning him, even though he just left last week weeping, injured. Tegan Nox did that. All right, it was for real. But there would have been never in a million years would you imagine she'd return to NXT as a heel. But this is Raw. So yeah, I could absolutely see him going that way.
I will apologise to WWE. Phil, what are you doing? Is there anyone else hearing boat ambience, or is it just me?
Is that your like happy place that you've got to do?
Ah, God, I need one. I bloody need a happy place. No, Apollo Crews, I will apologise to WWE if, in fact, last week's scripting and all the rest of it was meant to get him across as like full of hubris. Because at the end of the day, I found him really not likable at all. I thought, like, if anything, he deserved it for getting ahead of himself, that injury. I mean, it's Apollo Crews doing empty arena roles.
Yeah, I think there's something that can be done there with him, but it seems weird that they worked so hard on him trying to get him this babyface reaction and giving him plenty of time and stuff to suddenly turn him would be weird. But it's WWE. Who knows? Let's leave one of the final questions to Mohammed in the comments, who says, "Good day, everyone. With WWE's abysmal ratings, do you think that the whole WWE doing shows on empty arenas is getting unsuitable right now?" This is a topic we've dealt with quite a few times, but with the ratings dropping as they are, we don't know obviously when this is going to be sold. There's speculation about what's going on in Florida. Sige, do you think that the ratings could ever put pay to shows, or will they just keep plowing on and hope that the end is in sight for having crowds back in?
It's not a singular problem faced by WWE is the issue here. It would be nice if there was an acceptance of the fact that the shows we are pumping out now are dismal failures. They are eerie in atmosphere. They're lifeless. They just come off so weird. Yeah, it would be nice if they just stopped from a moral point of view. But ultimately, until they happen, I just cannot see this machine stopping. It's this relentless thing that will just keep going on and on and on until they are absolutely told otherwise by a governing body to not do this. They are not regulated. The ongoing circumstance that we all face in the world right now had the best possible chance of putting this goddamn company out of its misery, and they were enabled to do this incredibly by being classified as essential. I mean, they would have to do something horrendous to drive off that last remaining base, the base on Twitter that tells me that I'm a negative dick for having the temerity to not enjoy these awful shows. Jesus Christ, there are enough of them. I see it on Twitter all the time. If not my replies, it's Brian Alvarez. It's under even the ones who are overtly less abrasive than I am. Like even bloody Sean Ross Sapp, who for me is as impartisan as it gets. He gets it off the WWE reply guys. There are enough people who will watch this, I'm convinced.
The small other consideration is networks as well. What we don't know about WWE and AEW for that matter is just how much pressure is being put on the companies to deliver on that contract, which considering how things are at the moment, you'd think all those things could be frozen or voided. But if you're expected to deliver, say, like 48 out of 52 weeks of live television a year, then WWE would use that as a perfect excuse to do it. Well, we've got to fulfill our contract, brother. It'd be nice to think that the networks are actually taking more of a passive view and saying, no, we understand the circumstances. And this is on the wrestling companies to show a bit of an ethical code rather than just being able to fall back on the networks as being the ones to put the pressure on. There's so many moving parts, but from point of view as fans and, ethical viewers, it'd be great for the talent and everybody involved if it all hit pause.
One final question here from regular contributor Balls that I want to ask you, Hamfler, about Liv Morgan. Balls asking, has been insisting for weeks now that Liv Morgan should be involved in Money in the Bank. But seeing as we suspect or expect, I should say, that it's going to be Asuka or potentially Shayna Baszler who grabs the women's Money in the Bank contract, it kind of makes sense not to put Liv Morgan in there because it will hurt her by losing in that match, or at least it will piss off more of the fans that have really grown to support her. She's been on an upward trajectory on Monday Night Raw. What do you think happens with her now, is Balls' question, since she was excluded from Money in the Bank?
Well, she's looking pretty good in ring, which has always been this like huge mark against her, regardless of the size of the fan base she's got or the purpose-serving role the Riot Squad used to play. Like, something feels like it's happening with Liv Morgan, like the matches with Natalya, the other stuff she's been doing on Raw with Ruby Riott. It's holding up for a change. So it'd be nice to think that someone like Liv Morgan isn't rushed. You know, we're in a period now where talent can actually develop in this empty arena setting. These are reps. If absolutely nothing else, they're reps. So let Liv Morgan do that and remain on a trajectory rather than just going up and down like wrestlers do once they're challenged for titles and they're rendered meaningless, and save it. Because if her huge fan base are right, and if the scant evidence we've seen in these short matches proves to be true long term, then she's like a really worthy candidate to be on top on Raw or on SmackDown or whatever. But why would anybody be in a rush? Why, if you're a fan of a wrestler, would you be in a rush to see something paid off now in general? Let alone if you're a Liv Morgan guy and it feels like it's taken long enough for it to satisfy the brief.
Tidge?
What was the question again? Sorry.
Liv Morgan, what's the next thing for her, since she's not in Money in the Bank?
I don't think Becky Lynch is involved with WWE currently. At least she hasn't been after WrestleMania. Her return might be imminent. I don't know, but I said it on the Raw Review podcast, which you can obviously listen to on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast from for daily wrestling podcasts. No, I've genuinely been legitimately impressed by Liv Morgan. I find her work convincing. I think she's really tightened up her timings. I think her offense is quite interesting and unique. I don't think she can cut a promo, but ultimately that's something she can get drilled into her. Someone like AJ Styles, for example, was never a natural at this, and yet he comes across incredibly competent now. Promo, for better or worse, is not as important as it used to be. It just isn't. You don't have to be a great promo in WWE. You just have to be solidly and awfully competent. That's the awful reality. And unfortunately, Liv Morgan isn't even there yet. But hopefully she can get there, because I think in her ring work and her look and the fact that she's got a groundswell of support can get her there. I do rate Liv Morgan a lot in most every department, and I would love to see her be the one to wipe that increasingly smug smile off the face of Becky Lynch.
Yeah, very interesting where they go from here. I sense that they may wait and put Liv Morgan in potentially when someone like a Shayna Baszler is champion as a babyface challenger that the crowd will obviously get behind, and then they'll have their heart broken when Shayna Baszler does the inevitable stuff, hopefully, that she's been doing in NXT. But let us know about everything we've discussed in the comments section below. And of course, with the announcement, or not announcement, but revelation that perhaps AJ Styles could be returning tonight on Monday Night Raw, maybe even being inserted into the Money in the Bank ladder match. This has been the Raw Review. Do let us know your thoughts, as I said, in the comments section. And make sure you follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Whilst you're there, you can follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflet at
Michael Hamflet.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
thank you for all your donations, guys, by the way. That's really appreciated. At M. Sidgwick.
Follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow our editor, Phil, at Phil My Chambers. Apologies for any technical issues we've had today. It's been a bit of a nightmare, but we'll be back tomorrow, 4 p.m, live here on YouTube. Myself, Adam Nicholas, and Adam Cleary answering all the WWE questions that you want answered. And myself and the Dudley Boys will be reviewing Monday Night Raw tomorrow. You can listen to that podcast by searching for What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from, as Michael Sidgwick said. But this has been the Raw Preview Podcast. My thanks to the Dudley Boys. Thanks to you for joining us, and we will see you soon.